what's the deal, but this is the second, like, this is like the third time I've had a device time out on me while I was doing the live. I'm so sorry to y'all. I don't know what's going on with this. I'll deal with this later. I'll deal with that later. Anyway, I'm gonna try to pick up where I left off. So I was talking about how there's a difference between how my son and my daughter behave, right? So basically, you know, I was saying how my daughter, she's always moving, moving, moving. And my son, he's very chill. Now, most people will say, well, we prefer to deal with your son rather than your daughter because your daughter's always doing stuff, you she's kind of a busybody or whatever. Versus your son, he chill, he cool, right? Like he's easier to manage. Now, for me, of course, I was saying before the live got, disrupted, you know, it's easy for me to say I love them both because they're mine, right? Um, but I really mean that because you get to see the contrast in them, and I get to admire their personality. And I will concede to the fact that there is some bias here because these are my kids. But then, I mean, here's the thing about my kids though. I get to see different sides of them, and I get to see different sides of myself in them that I never would see just being me, right? So, anyway, going back to like, I wanted to kind of lean on this whole how how interactive Jazz is. Daughter's name is Jasmine, son name is Joshua, but I call him Junior because not to get confused with my husband Joshua. So anyhow, so Junior and Jasmine, right? And like I said, Jazz, she takes a lot. You gotta. It's never a dull moment. Like she's she's always going. And you know, like I was saying before, like what I really really love about her is that she doesn't stop at one thing. She doesn't, you know, allow things to discourage her easily. And unfortunately, I've seen a lot of situations where when people deal with kids, it's more like a control thing. Like a lot of times, and I know people don't mean any harm when they say this, but when they see my kids and they see how small they are, they say, "Oh, enjoy them while they're young," you know. It's like, and then they always say, "Oh, because when they become teenagers, that might be a different story." Shout out to Rookie Detective 29. Hello. So anyhow, you know, and I get what they're. No, I don't. I ain't gonna even lie. I don't get what they're saying. I mean, if I think about it, hi fan 03. I try to stay with the chat too. So, and I'm sorry if I butcher your name. And see, just bam, what's that? Scrubber. Yeah, shout out to all y'all. Um, when people say that, I'm thinking they're saying, because when kids start to become teenagers, they start having like opinions of their own. And a lot of times people like to associate having your own opinion with being rebellious or difficult. And I don't feel that way. Maybe because I grew up in a big family. I think it's really good for people to have their own opinion, especially if they disagree with you. Um, and who better to have an opinion that contrasts yours than your own kids? Because, I mean, they're you, right? They're an extension of you. Um, oh, this is High that says, "Why up so late?" Just put the kids to sleep, man. I just come on here when I can. Um, cause yeah, I'm just kind of talking about my kids. It's easier to do lives when I put my kids down to sleep. But you know, um, but yeah. So I get what people are saying, right? But at the same time, I'm like, it almost implies that your kids are gonna start acting out when they get a certain age. Because what I am learning is these kids, they can't even talk yet, and they already doing it. They already um, once they make a decision, they've made a decision, and all these different things. But I can't say this enough, especially my daughter. Like, oh my goodness, like Jazz, Jazz is like, once she get in her mind that she's gonna do something, if you try to stop her, I don't care how ridiculous it is, you're the bad guy. You could be like, hey, no, Jazz, don't mess with those scissors, it's a sharp object or whatever. Obvious things, or hey, don't touch that burner, it's hot. She don't care. She look at you like, don't tell me what to do with my own hand, right? And I love that. Now, a lot of people might be like, oh, you're kind of encouraging bad behavior or whatever, or, you're kind of spoiling. I've had family members that tell me, family and friends that say, oh, you're spoiling her, you're allowing her to get away with things. And I'm like, well, she's got the kind of personality where it's just a part of who she is. It's the way she expresses herself. So like my son, he expressed himself through being left alone. And when I say left alone, I mean he just want people to leave him alone, get out of his space. If you asking him a question, if the answer doesn't lead to a sandwich, he is not trying to hear it, right? Um, and that's the way he expressed himself. And most people believe that just because a person is passive, that they're more, what's the word, agreeable. And that's something that a lot of people who have interacted with my son, they will go, oh, well, since he's so cool, he's so laid back, he happy. It don't take much to make him happy. But he's the type of person that doesn't want to inconvenience anybody. So he will sit there and he, like, let's say this one lady, she was being nice. She had some candies, they were different flavored candies. And she just so happened to give him his least favorite candy out of the bunch. She didn't know which one he liked. She was just handing out candy. And he took the candy, he put it in his mouth, and he just sat there. And the lady was like, oh, he's such a good kid. Like other kids, they wanted more candy and all this other stuff. But he just kind of took the candy, he chilled. And when we got away from the lady, he spit that candy out so fast. And that's how he was only one. So he already knew to be polite. Like I didn't have to train him to do that. He just naturally was like, ladies being nice, let me get some candy. It's not what I want, but I appreciate her thinking about me. My daughter, on the other hand, Jazz, you do not do that with her. That's the last thing that you want to do. You give her something. First of all, if you offer her something, it better be fire. It better be bomb. It better be something that she really, really wants. It's an on and off switch. If it's not something that she wants, it's almost as if she's like, why would you offer me something that I don't want? And then like there has been times when people give her things that she doesn't want, and they would get upset with her for not being appreciative of her having something that she doesn't want. And I'm saying all this to say this. The title of the show tonight is like, I never missed a day, right? Since the day both my children was born, I have never missed one day of being in their lives. I've never been away from them full 24 hours. And just to kind of give credit to my husband, he works a lot. And sometimes he's on the road so much, he can't be home with the kids, right? Obviously. So he'd be gone for days, sometimes weeks, sometimes even months, depending on the demand of his job. And that makes me appreciate him even more because I guess the best way to put it is I'm going to compare myself. Since the day the kids were born, I've been in their life, like day after day consecutively. It's never been 24 hours. And that in and of itself, that just kind of moved me tonight because so often I hear of people, and there's nothing wrong with this, but I hear of people like leaving their kids at their siblings' house, leaving their kids at their mom's house, letting them spend a night over there, things like that, right? And I've never once had an interest in that, never. Um, and there are key factors to that, but the main thing is I cannot imagine not seeing my child for 24 hours. Like, there are a lot of people who have different circumstances, but the idea or the thought that a whole day has gone by and I haven't seen them, that is a very mm, it's something that I kind of get emotional about, right? And it oftentimes it makes me wonder like about people who actually do it. Like, okay, I've noticed there will be people who like they feel as though they're under a lot of pressure as a parent, especially like single parents. I would hear like a lot of single parents be like, well, I always got them, so now it's time for their dad to get them, or now it's time for their mom to get them because I have certain plans. Now that I think about it, I'm trying to think of a married couple. No, I've known married couples like that. So like, hmm, here's what I'm getting at. I feel like we live in a society here in the West where there are so many different ways that people run their life, right? And they say like it's like non-traditional, right? And they reinvent a way to live or they find an alternative. And so this is what I'm thinking about with that. Let's say no, let's scrap that. Let's just put my situation. One thing about my kids is that they know what it's like to deal with one person every single day. They know what it's like to interact with one person every day. And if we look specifically at them and their different personalities, let's start with the older one, the oldest one, Junior. He dealt with his mother every single day. He's seen me day in and day out. He's seen me with my different moods. He's seen me around his dad. He's seen me, while his dad was on the road, things like that. He's got to see me go through an array of emotions, like right. So when he gets older and he starts dealing with more people, and specifically when he starts dealing with women, he's already been around me to where he kind of he can kind of have a level of understanding from where women are coming from, if that makes any sense. Like, it's very, in my opinion, and I'm not a man, but in my opinion, I believe that it's easier for someone of the same gender to kind of understand another person of the same gender. And this is what I mean. As a boy, he can relate to other boys because he is a boy. And as he grow into a man, he can kind of see the perception of certain men or most men because he will become a man one day, inevitably, right? And he has this advantage of being with his mother, which helps him understand women. So it's like I'm like the blueprint of a woman, right? So since he deal with me 24/7, day in, day out, he gets to learn about the different changes that a woman go through, right? Cool. Now, for my daughter, we're both I'm starting to say we're both women. And it feels like we're both women because anybody who has a daughter, any woman specifically who has a daughter, especially your biological daughter, mm, it's like it doesn't even feel like I'm a woman, she's a girl. It just feels like she I don't want to say rivals me, but she challenges me. And I maybe that's just human nature, right? But it's like she feels the need to push at me. And I mean, it's I'm glad that I have a humble personality in this department to where I realize like I'm very self-aware. So I understand that I'm not saying that I'm not saying anything weird, but like my glam days, my party days, my nightclub days, my can't get enough days, I have finally simmered. Like everything shiny, everything that glitter ain't gold phase, every I love you ain't real phase. I have had time to come into my own to where, and I think that's an issue with a lot of women too. Um, I've had the opportunity to see my flaws and my faults, and I got this blessing of being married to my husband who is very keen on what's the word? I don't want to say something corny like supporting me on my life's journey. I don't want to, but it's kind of like that. Like to where even when we have hard conversations, we can still have conversations. Even when we're in conflict, we still are complimenting each other. We're not beating each other down, not to say we don't have spats and stuff, but for the most part, our main focus is to maintain our values, right? Regardless of how we feel. So, with that being said, when my daughter tries me, and she does, I never knew. See, most people think when a child becomes a teenager, that's when they start trying you. As far as I'm concerned, when they start getting motor skills, that's when they start being able to judge things, when they start seeing how you react to things, like, oh, if I do this, I can make you react like that. Once they start realizing that their actions can cause a reaction, then that's when they start thinking. And I think a lot of parents don't, what's the word? They don't keep up with the kids. They just go, I'm the parent, you're the child, you do this. And if you don't do this as a parent, I'm going to be a disciplinarian. Which, in my opinion, now, you know, I waited a little later to have kids, or let's just be honest, I was lucky to have kids later. So, with that being said, um, I've had more time. I can understand, like, I come from a really big family. So I got to see up close and personal. I got to see people who had kids as teenagers. I got to see people who had kids in their 20s. And the majority of people do have kids in their 20s, right? And I'm one of those few cases in my family where I started having children in my 30s, right? Wasn't done on purpose. It just for some reason, in my 20s, I no receipt, right? So anyway, um, with that being said, when my daughter tried me, it makes me think about who I was when I was younger, who I was when I was single, um, who I was when I was a newlywed. I think this is why it's so important to marry before you carry too. Like there are steps to this, you know. Um, and man, I'm not trying to jump too many places at once, but there's a reason why there are steps in life. There are milestones in life, and a lot of times when people do things out of order, they start having so many disorders within their relationships and within their lifestyle, and they can't seem to, figure it out. And this is what I'm getting at. Let's say a girl who has a baby as a teenager, or anybody. Well, I'm gonna speak from a woman's perspective. There is so much that goes into being a mom, and I used to be told a lot that be careful who you marry, be careful who you have kids with, because obvious reasons, but where you decided to merge your life with, that's like, that's kind of where you're at. This is what I mean. If you have a baby at 14, you only have 14 years worth of wisdom to pour into that child. Now, this is another thing too. When people be like, "Oh, I was wise beyond my years," that is, for me, in my opinion, I think that person is the most delusional person. When people be, "Oh, I'm very mature for my age," like that just gives it away. Like that conversation's over at that point. Um, because you are just as wise as how old you are. Simple as that. Now, yeah, I know there are gray haired fools, but they figured out through the time of their life how to stay foolish that long. So, with that being said, we got somebody in their 20s. Some of us who are in our 20s, getting into our late 20s, going into our 30s, um, we kind of got an idea of how chaotic that time is. I think my baby might be getting up, y'all. 1 second. Hey, y'all, I had to go get my baby now. Um, so, and I might wrap this up a little sooner. I just wanted to make this point though, and maybe see how she responds. Cause sometimes when she wake up, she be ready to go. She be ready for me to go in there and go to sleep with her. But anyhow, this is what I was saying. I think I was leaving off with, what point was it? I think I was saying something about, because I was getting on this point about how I've had time. So when my daughter challenges me, I don't trip about it. Um, because I remember, yeah, because I was going through like the different, age groups or whatnot, right? Because I've had time. So I know like the 14-year-old me probably would have been like, hey, I'm your mama, 20-year-old me would have been like, hey, I'm still trying to figure stuff out, kiddo. You gotta give me a break, right? And then of course, here I am in my 30s and I'm like, I remember when I used to do that. I remember when I used to act like that. Even my son, I just be like, man, I remember when I had that attitude, or, I understand where he's coming from. Like there would be times when he would get so agitated because he's right. Like I remember when I was getting on him about something, he didn't do it. It was something that his sister did. And, I just assumed he did it because usually it was something that he would do. And he just kept shaking his head, like, But then at the same time, he was like, okay, cool, if you gonna assume that I did something wrong, then I'm gonna just let you assume that. Most people might take that as, oh, he's what's the word? Like he's trying to be rebellious or he's trying to be confrontational. No, he's not. It now I know he's not, you know, but to the average person, they might take that as, oh, your son, he's being, difficult. But since I understand him, I don't trip about it because again, I can see myself in him, and as well as I can see his father in him as well. So that's what I was talking about too, like putting the cart before the horse. Like when you have kids with somebody that you don't know, or somebody that you're not committed to, or somebody who's not committed to you, that is excruciating. Like that, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, but that is hard because there has been times when my kids were doing stuff and I just could not make sense of it. And times when I even was like, when I really don't understand them, I don't default to being a disciplinary. I don't default to, you know, I'm the mother, I'm the parent, you're the child. I don't do that. And I got the privilege of sometimes I just call their dad, or when their dad is in town, if they're doing something that I don't understand, I just ask their dad, like, hey, why they do that? Why they act like that? And I think that's the issue with people these days is that just imagine if you dealt with one person from the day that you were born and that person spent most of her days with you. That person got to see you over a 24-hour period for years and years and years at a time. And so as you're dealing with getting older and as you're dealing with life, you will have a lot of people that try to tell you who you are, tell you what you believe, or even judge you for thinking or believing a certain way. And you can have the confidence and stand on the fact that you know who you are because you've dealt with someone ever since the day you were born. So, for example, when I brought up the example of how my son, I accused him of doing something, and his reaction was like, no, I didn't. Most people be like, well, who you talking to, right? Like, who you bucking at, right? But for me, I understand, like, first of all, to accuse him, I'm the type of person, I don't want nobody to accuse me of nothing. If you ain't, like, that's one of the quickest ways to get me on my bad side, just accuse me of something, right? So when I look at him sideways thinking, oh, you did this again, didn't you? Like, no, it wasn't even me, it was her, and he pointed at his sister right away. And then even looking at my daughter, like, like I said before, she's the type, if you point her out, she'll be like, and? Like, and again, most people will probably look at her and be like, oh, so you just kind of do whatever you want to do, or you rebellious. No, it's not that at all. It's just her thing was, okay, I'm busted. So what we gonna do now? Which I can hear myself saying the same exact thing. So when her reaction was like, yeah, he pointed at me, I ain't think he was gonna snitch, but here we are, what we gonna do? When they go out in the real world and, let's say Jazz get caught up in some BS and people might perceive her as like not having remorse. It's not that she doesn't have remorse. It's like, okay, at this point, okay, you caught me, right? So, well, my punishment gonna be less. I got more things to do. Cause it's not that I don't care about what I did wrong. I just realized I did something wrong. So what I did was I left it there. I moved on. I didn't do it again. But now you're trying to hold me accountable for something that I did that you found out about. And that's how she thinks. And no, it's nothing malicious by it, but people wouldn't understand it if they didn't truly know her the way I know her. Like, of course, nobody's gonna truly know me and Josh's kids the way we know them because we've been here since day one. But for people who really take the time to get to know them and people who look for good qualities in them, they will understand that they don't mean to be harmful. And if they did mean to be harmful, they're very upfront. Now, I've never, maybe this might be my mommy glasses going, but I've never really seen my children be mean spirited. Actually, very kind people. They're actually very nice people, in my opinion. They're nicer than me. They're nicer than me and my siblings coming up. I have to say that. And that nice thing, they got definitely their daddy all day. They daddy, he's a very nice man. Um, but at any rate, I think that's the problem with society. I think that's one thing is that we don't have anyone who truly knows us. And oftentimes, when we get into romantic relationships, we're looking for somebody to see a side of us that nobody ever took the time to look at. And it's like we really just want to be seen and we really just want to be heard. And oftentimes, when people have romantic feelings towards us, they're looking for reciprocity. They're looking for somebody to give them what they dished out. So instead of just looking at me for me, you're looking at me to balance you out as well. It's not just to be like, okay, this is me, this is what I'm about, and you just appreciate me for who I am. Which brings me to my next thing. Having a stable foundation for your kids before you have them is so important because that way they won't ever have to go looking for anything. One second, I'm gonna adjust this. My baby's asleep. All right, cool. Had to adjust the light was shining like right in my daughter's face. It's like, but anyway, yeah, like sometimes people ask me crazy questions that I don't appreciate. One of those questions is, since I'm such a strong advocate for family and marriage, people say, well, what if your son become a baby daddy? Or what if your mom, your daughter, have a child out of wedlock? And, when I was younger, like it was years ago, when I was a new mom, I used to get really agitated when people would do that because I was so focused on being a new mom and enjoying being married. And it's like you always want the best for your kids, especially when you've done the absolute best that you could, right? So you want your child to do equal or greater than you, naturally. And when I was a new mom, I used to take it as a swipe or I used to take it as a disrespectful question, especially considering who it came from. And I'll get to that point a little later. I might, depending on how long, because I ain't know I was gonna be talking this long, but I ain't even know my kids was gonna be chilling this long. So anyway, I'm milking it for what I can, staying on for what I can. So anyway, let's unpack it. First of all, the idea that I want my children to do equal or better than me. I'm so focused on them being equal or better. All I care about is where they are right now and how they can be at their best today. As far as their love and romantic interests, they don't even have all their teeth. Like, and it's only two groups of people that ask me these kinds of questions. It's either people who don't have kids and most likely will never have them, or people who have broken relationships and children who are suffering as a result of those broken relationships. One thing I have to say, people who are more closely aligned with my lifestyle, they usually don't ask those negative hypothetical questions about my kids. And I'm thinking they don't do it because obviously they wouldn't want it done to them, but I think there's a certain mindset that comes with being married, legally married, that is so unique, regardless of that couple's similarities to others. Every marriage is unique, right? So then, let's just break down the people who have kids who are in broken relationships. This is me on the outside looking in. I can't relate because I'm not experiencing it. But from the outside looking in, people who have children out of wedlock and oftentimes are co-parenting, that life looks so stressful. I would never wish that on anybody. So when it comes to the idea of my own children going through that, my first mind just flares up like, what? That's like you asking me, what if your kid get hit by a bus? Yeah, my baby ain't even 3 yet, and you asking me these questions. It is crazy, but at the same time, from the outside looking in, there's no structure with people who are quote unquote not traditional. So since there's no structure, then all bets are off. You know what I mean? Everything is free game, right? So when they talk like this, I don't even think they understand like how it's offensive or why it's offensive, because they come from a world where it's a different set of rules. It's a whole different thing, whole different lifestyle. And especially when what they're asking about is not foreign or strange to themselves. So this is what I'm getting at. If you are a single parent, where's the offense of your child being a single parent? Especially when being a single parent is so normalized. So for that person, this is not a strange question. Now, to that person, I have to say, being legally married is a conscious decision. And it is an intentional decision. Regardless of the reasons around it, is very intentional for whatever reasons. And those reasons are strictly between the two people who made the vow. Yes, even Travis Hunter and his wife. That's between those two. You know why there's so much content generated around Travis Hunter? It's like any lie. Like, there's only one way to tell the truth, but there are so many ways to tell a lie. People can always speculate on what that man is going through with that woman. But at the end of the day, all decisions made are between those two. No matter what any of us say, it will strictly be between those two. That being said, as it relates to this situation with my family belonged to me and my husband. And those in my family, my son, my daughter, they are our business. And people who are co-parenting, they could never understand. They will never understand this level because there's nothing binding you. You don't have to think twice. When I make decisions, I have to not just think about me. I have to think about my husband because everything that I do, because we're legally bound to each other, it's automatically seen as if he co-signed on everything. So when it comes to our kids, we're very, very intentional. When we decided to have children, even though we had a hard time having children, and we continue to try to have children anyway, even against recommendations of our doctor and everything, that was strictly between he and I. And although a lot of people had opinions, at the end of the day, marriage is between us two, right? The children only belong to us two. So I get, like, now that I've taken more time and I'm like less hormonal and everything, blah, 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 already had the kids, had some time with them. From the perspective of what people are asking, I understand now that it wasn't like malicious. But at the same time, now I'm looking and I'm like, just being honest, like, me and my husband, we got lucky. You know what really kills me about people that have exemplary lives or like the model life? One thing that I didn't think about is, let's say people who preach marry before you carry, right? A lot of times those people, obviously they've been with other people before their spouse. And it just so happened that they did not end up being a parent with the person that they knew they were gonna have a good time with and discard or whatever the case may be. A relationship didn't work out. So one thing that I've learned on my vlogging journey is to, what's the word? Not, let's do this. To acknowledge the fact that that could have been me. And I've had some really sticky relationships before my marriage. I, man, I'm so glad I didn't get stuck with any of my exes. No offense if any of y'all ever see this, but hey, hope you're living a good life. But most people, they don't get lucky like that. Most people, you was messing around with so and so, doing such and such, and now you got a baby. You thought maybe you could fix it because you've been dealing with so and so and doing such and such, and then you find out later, like, hey, this ain't the one. Okay. I just got out of the burning house before I burned down in there. So I acknowledge it. And so did my husband. Oh my God, that man. But anyway, so now I kind of understand it because, vlogging has helped me, interacting with people has helped me to where I don't get offended. Because that's another thing about, I'm kind of doing this as a hobby. I'm just, playing with the numbers and stuff like that. It's becoming kind of like fun. And as you play with these numbers, you come across a lot of different people. And people just, I get trolls, I get all kinds of stuff. It's really kind of neat. And after interacting with so many people, it has opened my mind in so many different ways. And it's really therapeutic, honestly. But it's caused me to observe myself because there was a time when I was kind of like on my high horse. I was kind of like, you know, I made better decisions, so I'm here, you know. Um, but if I'm truly being honest, you know, just by grace, I was able to do this. Because so many people have made the wrong decision and it has patterned their entire life afterwards, right? I'm grateful for that. So I guess to answer the question, I would hope my kids would never experience something like that. However, if they do, they know that they've grown up in an environment where they got to see it done right. And the beautiful thing about growing up in an environment like that is that even if you do stray, you know what the right thing looks like. You know what the right thing feels like. So at least they have that. And on top of that, they know that they are loved and they know that they're known. So me and their dad, we put so much energy into them to where they know without a shadow of a doubt that they are our most prized, I don't want to say possession, but they are the prize of our life, you know. Like we absolutely love our kids, you know. We adore them. Even when they're doing stuff that we don't particularly like, they're still, you know. Yeah. So even if they do stray, it's like, well, we're human. You know, we make mistakes. And hopefully they get back on track, right? And even if they don't, they're still loved, right? Grandkids, everybody's still loved. Okay. That's for the non traditional folks. The people with no kids. It just feels like, and I extend way more grace to people who have no kids because people who have no kids, they have no idea. Before I had kids, you know, I grew up in a really, really big family. And so I got to see people go through a lot with their kids, and then I've even helped a babysat, blah, blah, blah. So I would kind of like imagine how hard it is because sometimes I would get overwhelmed babysitting. And when I did, I tell people, hey, you got to come get your baby. I'm beat, right? Um, just imagining that you don't have that off button. Just imagining that you can't just call somebody and say, hey, your son jumping on my furniture, I need you to come get him. You know, before I had my own son who jumped on furniture, um, I couldn't imagine what it was like 24/7, day in, day out. You gotta get up again, you gotta take them to the potty again, you gotta brush their teeth again, you gotta put them in a bath again, you gotta cook them dinner, you gotta cook them breakfast. They're sick. You gotta spend time with them while they're sick. You gotta wipe their face. It's just so much work and it's relentless. And for people who don't have kids, I don't think they should worry too much about people who do. Not unless you got the gall to date someone or marry someone who already has children. If you have no children, my strongest recommendation is that you don't run and jump into this thing feet first. Don't, don't. And I'm speaking as a person who has a lot of support. A lot of support. Like, I'm speaking as a person who have really positive people in my life. It is so challenging. So challenging. And that's why I just, going back to people who are not traditional, I can't imagine it any other way. It's got to be insufferable. I hope everybody, they got their own things. I hope for the best for everybody. But I know me personally, I know I wouldn't be able to handle it. I would not be able to handle it. So when the people who have no kids ask me that question, they had this mentality of, when they get grown, they're gonna make their own decisions. But here's the thing about that. Going back to how every day in, day out, I've been with these kids, right? Not too many things can catch me off guard when they do stuff. When you've dealt with somebody since their conception, you know, I've got to have so much going on to where I can't see them. And then, not to mention, I can't stress this enough. They're mine, they're Josh's. So it's like, what? You know what I mean? Like, I understand people who be like, this is my stepkid. Okay, you don't know the other side, or this is my kid, but it's not my spouse's kid. Okay, maybe your spouse has a different set of values you don't know about. Or maybe your spouse's family member who's not their kid's dad or whatever, maybe they have values that they pour into their child. Different thing, right? But when it's just you and your spouse and that's it, it's so easy to make decisions that your children are comfortable with. It's far less resistance. It's just so easy. Like, we just make decisions. We just do things with our kids. Like, and then we're figuring out what they like. And their personalities are so, I don't want to say they're so polarized, but they really are. Like, like I said, Junior's more of an introvert. Jasmine's more of an extrovert. She's always out. She's like me. She's kind of like the social butterfly. And Junior, he's cool, but he rather just not. And that's why a lot of times y'all might just see me, with Jazz. I got her right now. She's just, hey, what's up? What's going on all the time? Junior, his whole thing is, oof, I'm so glad we are done being outside. I want to go back in my room, play with my toys, So, with them being so different from each other, my husband and I, we study them a lot. So then, and then there's a lot of, I'm going to tell you another thing. Having a mom at home, somebody to talk to, women, we just inherently nosy. Anytime my kids got something going on, talk to me, tell me everything. I want to know every detail. I'm at the edge of my seat. They can't even form sentences yet. And when I tell you, sometimes they'll just walk out the room and they just got this look on their face and be like, what happened? Like, I want to know everything. And to have a person that's so interested all the time in you, I think that's what a lot of people are missing. Like, if you, I remember growing up, okay, story time, sidebar. My stepdad, right? So my biological father passed away. My stepdad pretty much, raised me or whatever. And, I had my mom, of course. It wasn't just my stepdad. But anyway, when I started getting to an age where guys were getting interested in me, I never really picked up on it. Shoot, even girls were shooting their shot at me. Nothing. And, people used to take me as I was being too cool. And it wasn't that. It was just, I was so adored at home. There was nothing. I noticed, like, a lot of my friends who were getting into relationships real fast, a lot of my guy friends would be like, I'm gonna be better than my dad. It was like they couldn't wait to be better than their dad. And my female friends, a lot of them were like, I don't have my dad, so I want to be able to have that masculine energy or whatever. for me, I never felt like I was missing anything. So like, guys buy me flowers, that's sweet, And then sometimes guys will get mad. They're sweet. Like they feel like they get shot down. No, I only gave her a compliment. I bought you flowers. Like, well, hey, you could give her flowers with this compliment. And I wasn't impressed with the flowers. Stepdad, he bought my mama flowers, buy me flowers, buy my sister flowers. So it was like having flowers was like, yeah, my mom has a whole garden. Um, this one guy told me I had like a Cleopatra complex. Like, the whole story of Cleopatra, I think Julius Caesar was trying to get with her and, kept trying to get her all these gifts or whatever. And it was like, no matter how expensive the gift, or how rare the gift was, it was never good enough or whatever. There was, her being the queen of the world, there was like nothing he can do to impress her, right? And I was accused of that. And it was like, no, it's not that I'm not impressed. It's just that I'm not looking. I'm not looking. Because my parents allowed me to be a kid. So I never, even if I was like mature, quote unquote, it was because my parents were poured into me, and all the wisdom that they poured into me, I was able to utilize it. So a lot of my friends were jumping into relationships real heavy. And I'm talking elementary school, I'm talking middle school, I'm talking we young. Now that might not blow the lid off of many people, because these days kids are telling me about rappers getting unalive. These days, and maybe even in the 90s, I was coming up in the 90s, maybe even in those days, right? But I wouldn't know what was going on. You know why? Because I had parents. Like, I remember I wasn't allowed to watch certain television and all that stuff. And nor was I interested, because the type of things that my parents cared about and valued, entertainment was entertainment. But then you'll have entertainment for adults, and then you'll have entertainment for children. And we had those kind of, we had that kind of structure. So the kids in the house, we had that kind of structure growing up. So anyway, how that relates to my kids, it's like they don't even look for nothing. They don't want for nothing. When they get out and they interact with other groups of people and all this other stuff. I remember another story time. Laundromat. I was just telling my husband about this today. There's a candy machine, and instead of candy, it has like Tide Pods in it. And you can go to this machine, put a quarter in, put 2 quarters in, and turn the thing, and it comes out like the old candy bar machine. And this one lady in the laundromat saw my daughter turning the thing. And I didn't really think much about it, because I understand that Jazz, she's like I've always said, she does whatever she wants. She's just having a good time. My daughter and my son, they do not care for processed candy. They don't. They'll take it if people offer it to them, because they're being polite. But more often than not, they end up throwing it away. The reason, and I don't even tell them to throw it away, they just throw it away. Like they get to the nearest trash receptacle and they throw it out. Mainly the reason why, like, let's say if you give them something that's like pineapple flavor, they eat pineapple for breakfast. So when you give my child high fructose corn syrup, he don't spit it out. This is not pineapple, right? Well, anyway, this one lady saw my daughter turning the machine, just messing with stuff. And she was like, oh, that poor child. She wants candy. What? Now, that was my first reaction. I was like, huh? And then she turned into, she wants candy, but there's nothing but Tide Pods in that machine. And I'm like, okay. I take my daughter, I move her away from the machine because this lady is so emotional. And then she goes, you don't have any candy? You got kids that young and you didn't bring them any candy? And I'm sitting here thinking to myself, why would I feed my kids that? But then that's when I started thinking too, like, ooh, am I learning that people like me don't go to the laundromat because of stuff like this? Like, you know, I used to be like a hard left-leaning Democrat. I used to believe in minimalism and what is it, low-cost living, things like that, going green, saving the planet. I used to have this idea that if I go to the laundromat, that I don't have to worry about pulling more power from the power grid or pulling more water from the environment selfishly for my own home that I pay for. Maybe I can save the planet if I'm one of those few people that practices group economics, and instead of having my own individual machines, I just go to the community machine. Ooh, having children will make you rethink that. Because looking at these strangers in public, smelling that dirty laundry, and now they're telling me, why don't you have any high fructose corn syrup to feed your kids? Why don't you have artificial flavors to feed your kids? Huh? And you know what I mean? Like, ugh, like, I remember when there was a time when people used to complain about the taste of food and how it's getting worse. And now we live in a time where people are complaining because all they eat is prepackaged foods. And these prepackaged food costs more than just getting just fresh produce. And now here I am, I'm enjoying my daughter, interacting with her environment. What this other lady see here though is that I am being cruel to my child because I'm not giving her candy that'll rot her teeth out. So, okay, I went there to say this. My kids' decisions are going to be deeply influenced by the fact that their life is holistic. A lot of times, people make decisions, shout out to Kevin Samuels, out of fear, scarcity, and lack. Those three things are not what my children's upbringing is made of. Most people, they have to deal with fear because they're unstable. They have to deal with scarcity because they only have support of one parent. And they always have to deal with lack because it takes two people to make the child, but if one person is pitching in, that is rough. And I know people like to abuse this. Let me go on here and say this. It takes a village to raise a child. Boy, I hate how much that expression has been abused. A village is not a supplement for your failed relationship. It's not. It's just not. Most people go, I don't need my child's father. I got my friends. No, that's not what the village was for. Even guys do it these days. DDG, ooh, the only difference between the love of your kid and a woman. There's this theory that I'm starting to lean on. This whole I'm gonna just do a rundown. I'm gonna say Adam and Eve, even though her name is Chihuahua, but for the sake of language and understanding. Ooh, that's gonna take a lot to take apart. But I'm gonna just try to run it down. I gotta run this up a little bit. I put my baby in the bed, but Adam, he had his thing, and then Eve, she had her thing, and then the serpent, he did his thing. Yeah, I'm paraphrasing. And then, the woman, Eve, went to Adam, and then Adam, he subscribed to what the woman was doing, and then before you know it, Yah, who they call God, had to come in and check everything. Okay, cool. I'm starting to realize now that there's death in the world, right? Man has choice. There was a time when man's eyes were not open. It was just all what Yah said to Adam, and that was it. But now that Adam can choose between Yah and the devil, or Yah and something else, Yah and his wife, now that allows for man to behave like the serpent. And so, since now man has a choice, that pretty much puts woman in a really weird place, right? And I'm gonna say this too. Woman has been in conversation with the serpent longer than man has. And I think that's the reason why we're so trippy and we can get tricked into anything, because our eyes are open first, right? I'm saying all this to say this. The serpent was a liar. And women are very good at telling lies. We learned from the best in the beginning. So when we have expressions like "it take a village," we let everybody think of a village pictographed in their mind as you got the man who's the hunter and the woman who's the gatherer and the children in the house or in the tent or whatever. When the reality is, when a woman says it takes a village, more often than not, what she's saying is, I can have this kid because I want it. And I'm so grateful, and I hate to say this, but I'm so grateful that the Trump administration is no longer enabling these types of women to live on the system and continue to take advantage of taxpayers, because I didn't think that I would see the day of reckoning in my lifetime, because for so many decades, even over half a century, women have been like, I don't need no man. And they just lived off the government. And then I'm gonna lean on the black thing. These black power people are always taking a government check. Well, anyway, for my husband and I, it's like we don't live in that tricky environment. We don't live in that I don't want to say dishonest, but in that gray area space. We don't. Our kids, they're in an environment that is very structured. And if they go outside of it, they know what structure looks like. And I hope for the best for them. But I also truly hope that they understand that they do have a choice. But more than anything, I hope they realize that their father and I did our absolute best to help them make whatever decisions they want to make in life. And they're going to see the best results, the best that we can possibly give them. And then they'll get to judge on whether or not they want less than somebody giving their all, and being able to show them scripture as to why we do what we do. Because one thing I'm realizing about people that have them ugly hypotheticals for our kids, they haven't been here since day one. They haven't even been there for their own since day one. Some of them ain't even got their own at all to know what day one even means. But that's something that I'm learning about. And I'm telling you right now, man, I had a really emotional night, you know, putting my daughter to sleep, even putting her to sleep right now. Once again, I just think that people, they don't have the type of bond that my kids have, and they're looking for it online. But anyway, that's my whole spiel. I really thought I was gonna be on here shorter. I appreciate everybody who chimed in, and y'all know how I do. When I get these kids to chill out, I come on here and talk to y'all, but I catch y'all on the next live. Good night.